On this episode of Delivering Marketing Joy, I talk with Tony Guarnaccia, and he talks to us about how to democratize marketing. Hey there, and welcome to a brand new edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hasseman, and joining me today, I'm super excited about this guest. He's a guy who helps turn around businesses and make sure that businesses get off on the right track. Tony Guarnaccia, he's also the founder of Results Club. So Tony, thanks so much for joining me today. Someone who's recommended you being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really happy to be here.
That's cool. That's cool. So I want to dive right in. I'm so curious about one thing that you talk a lot about, and that's your mission to democratize marketing. I'm curious, what does that mean, and why do you think that matters right now?
Yeah, so democratize marketing is all about bringing the same strategies, tools, and tactics that the best companies have to kind of everyone. And really where this starts is at what I call the marketing revolution. And so if you look back, 50, 60 years ago, it was really simple. You place an ad in a newspaper and boom, you get some business.
Right.
And then things got a little bit more complicated. You had radio and TV broadcast media, and things got a little bit more complicated. There's more going on. Still, average small business could make something work. Then all of a sudden, boom, what do you get? You get the internet, right? And back then, if you're old enough to remember, they had directories, Yahoo being one, which sadly is not around today, right? And then what'd you need after that? You need a search engine, right? So if you're old enough for this, you have Alta Vista and Lycos and Excite, none of which are really around today, right? So it's more and more complicated. Then you have Google. Yeah. And Google really changes the game, but things didn't stop there. The next evolution of the revolution was you had social media, right? So now all of a sudden people are creating content and you're getting more and more. And then from there, you are competing not just against other people or even your competitors, you're competing for people's attention. Yeah. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against Amazon. Yeah. You're competing against YouTube. Good luck, right? Like, how are you going to do this? And so the gist of it is really created three key issues for the average business. Number one, how do you break through the clutter, right? Because actually even before that, let me go back one step. How do you break through the fragmentation, right? So let's talk about fragmentation. So as you go through the revolution, there's more and more channels, right? It was really simple. You had radio, TV, except now there's really a gazillion sites, more than anyone can count. So how do you know where to actually show up? Do you do direct mail? Do you do radio? Do you do TV? Do you do the internet? Okay, you guys want to do the internet? Great. Do you want to go into Google? Do you want to do a Facebook? Do you want Instagram? Where do you go? So fragmentation is problem number one. Problem number two is once you get a channel that could work for you, how do you break through the clutter? How do people actually notice you? So hurdle number one, all right, great, I found the channel. I'm going to do Facebook. Go on Facebook. There's a million things, right, for attention, right? So how do you get through that? And then problem number three, you get through all that. How do I actually manage the technology? Like, how do I know? Because then all of a sudden, again, before, maybe you write an ad, someone could draw it even. Now you need code and pixels and craziness. And so I don't care the size of the company. The best companies in the world still are challenged, but how much more so are the little guys, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what the marketing revolution is all about, those problems. And that's what democratized marketing is all about, is how do you fix that? How do you help the average business owner, the rest of us actually compete when so much of the deck is stacked against them?
Yeah, because there's so many, like you said, tools. It's like you can't be an expert in everything. Right? Yeah. So I'm curious, we're living in a weird time. I don't need to tell anybody that, but and many businesses right now, the resource of time and effort and money, they're just tight. That's just the reality. So what can a business do to grow if they're kind of living in that reality right now?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all at where we're at for the most part, based on the decisions we made. Mm-hmm. And really that comes down to where are we spending our time, our effort, and our money? Because those are all kind of the decisions we make. It's really where are we prioritizing that? And so what I found is that you want to focus on what's going to actually drive results. And it's easier to say, but essentially the goal of every business should try to get a flywheel. And so if you look at one of the seminal business books called Good to Great by Jim Collins, he talks about the importance of building a flywheel. But to get back to the marketing, democratized marketing concept, for most businesses, that flywheel is broken. They never get the momentum to really go anywhere. And how you allocate those time, effort, and resources is really what drives that. But really, I guess maybe what you're saying is, how do you actually do that, right? It sounds great in theory. What do you do?
Yeah.
Well, and this is what my book is actually about. It's looking at the steps you take. And so if I could, I'll share the story of my mother. And so my mother grew up in a time much like today. So, as we're recording this, we're dealing with the pandemic, of course. Back in the late 1930s, they had the polio epidemic. And so, unfortunately, at the age of just 9 months year old, my mom contracted polio.
Wow.
And she was not able to walk from the age of 9 months all the way up to 14 years old. Jeez. And so, yeah, it's tough. Yeah. I asked her, how in the world did you survive that before all this even? Yeah. I was asking, like, what's your mindset? How do you actually get to where you are? And what the lesson I learned, which I take to myself today, is you have to break things down. You have to take them and put them into what I call small steps. And so when she got started, the nurses, the doctors, where they started was with helping her with her mechanics, right? Be able to, move with the nervous system. So they had her working with pottery to get her hands moving. Then eventually she went in a swimming pool to kind of move more to the point where she was able to walk between two pools and take small steps. And how that relates to a business and getting momentum is that's what business owners have to do with their time, effort, money. They have to take really three things. They have to know what steps to take. They need to know how to take those steps. And then finally, they have to actually take the steps. So those are the three areas and that's really the secret to having success in any area, whether it's losing weight, a business, life. It's really those simple things. What steps do I take? How do I take those steps? And then actually taking those steps.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can get stuck on one of those, right? And if we don't get through all three, we're going to get no progress, really.
Yes.
So that's cool. I like that. So the final question for you. So, what are a few small changes that you see, right, that any business can make right now to improve cash flow? Because let's face it, right now, anytime cash is king, but right now for sure, right?
Yeah.
And so what are some small steps that businesses can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I talk about in my book is the idea of a results flywheel, but the results loop, which is the 6 factors that any business can use to grow, regardless of the market, regardless of the stage. Those are the areas. And really, if you're looking at the cash flow, you want to look at those different areas. And so it starts with number 1, your market, right? So are you serving the right market? And just to take a step back, what really is cash flow? Let's before I get into the different 6 steps, let's take a look at those. So when it comes to sustainability of the business, I really look at 2 things. How much, which is your profitability, how much money you have coming in, and when is that money coming in, which is your cash flow. And so to manage both of those areas, you first thing is first, right? So cash. And so when I first got into this pandemic, what I did was I looked at, again, to keep it simple, how much is going out and how much is coming in. Real simple. Yeah. So first thing you do from a cash flow perspective is cut expenses. So how do you do that? Well, I printed out my credit card receipts, went line by line and said, okay, is this something I think you're in the agency business too, right?
Right.
How much software do you use?
Yep.
That you don't need anymore, right? So strike those out, right?
Yeah.
Can you reevaluate who maybe you have freelancers, you can bring stuff in-house.
Right.
How are you optimizing your team's time? Is there areas you can negotiate? So for instance, my web hosting, I called them and said, hey, during this pandemic, is there a way you can work with me? And they essentially reduced their fees in half.
Wow.
Which was very significant. So a simple phone call, very quickly got that reduced. And then I also called up other vendors and saw if I could get reduce fees for paying more in advance. So for instance, QuickBooks, I was on the monthly fee. And then I said, well, why am I doing that? I'll just pay for it up front. It's not that much money anyway. And so I saved another 20% there. So just really being pragmatic and going through and looking at what's going out. Now, the other side is what's coming in, right? So you want to look at what's coming in. And so how do you do that? Well, I would start with making sure your existing customers, patients, clients are paying you, right? So go through and call and say, hey, have you guys, are you on time? Renegotiating, if you have to, but get as much that's out there as possible. Then if going to my, factors, the results factors I have, one of the big ones, which is factor number 6, is loyalty. So why not go back to your existing clients and see if they'll buy again? Or if that doesn't work, go back to past prospects and see if they can buy it again. And if that doesn't work, go back to people that have bought, 5-10 years ago. I mean, there's always low-hanging fruit out there. So try to get that revenue realized. And so the more you can do to just get that, the better you'll be. Then the next thing is, can you increase what they're buying? So growth factor number 5 in the results loop is lifetime value, which is the size of those buyers. So if you have an existing buyer today, can you get them to buy just a little bit more? Add more value to them. So going through this process is really the key. And then sometimes, we might say, well, none of this is working. What do I have to do? In that case, you might have to pivot. And so if you have to pivot, this is where my framework really comes in handy, because the first thing you want to do is say, am I in the right market? Should I serve another market? Should I go higher end? Because guess what? Higher end, they probably have money, right? By definition. Or do I go lower end? Lower end, maybe, they could take that too, but that you have to be efficient. The next thing is, does that market have the right products and services, right? So maybe you change your product and service mix. And then the third area is your value. So the key of any business growing is making sure you're providing value. So is the value you're providing right for where the market is today? Not 6 months ago or a year ago, we wish you were there. It's not. How are you providing today? And also for the future, for where it's going. So like, for instance, we're both in marketing. And so I realize, like in my business, as an example, a lot of people are going online, right? And they're doing virtual stuff. So I'm working on products for podcasting. I'm doing virtual summits. I'm moving to where the market is. Right. So if you're in the event world, maybe you change. So those are kind of just, I gave you a lot here to take, but those are kind of all areas that I really focus on in my own business, but also the people I advise.
I love it. So you mentioned your book. I mean, real quickly, can you tell us the name of the book and where to find it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the name of the book is, again, inspired by my mother's story. It's called Small Steps to Grow Profits. And that's available right now for pre-order. And it'll be out everywhere, Amazon and Audible, everywhere I can possibly put it. It will be there.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's
congrats.
Thank you. Well, cool. So you've answered my 3 questions. I give everybody a chance to ask me one. Do you have one for me?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, I'm shifting in the market, right? And so where's everybody going? Podcasting. And so my question is, what is the one thing I should be aware of, or maybe a mistake you made, or what you should do, what you would have been done differently for launching your podcast? Because one of the things I always try to do is find someone that's already done what I want to do and ask them the question, because why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the number one piece of advice I tell everybody is that if you want to be successful, it will take longer than you think. I think so many times we create that, it matters to us, so it must matter to everybody, right? And so I think that the reason that that this particular show has done well is I'm in episode 300 and some. And so every Wednesday I churn out another one. And so by doing that, over and over and over again, it develops that some level of success and sort of that's number one. But the other thing I would say, probably the thing that I didn't do as well is I didn't get really, really, really specific about audience at first. It was just like, I want to interview the people I know because I know they'll say yes, right? But really thinking through the audience, and that sounds super basic, but I think so many times we do it of what's interesting to us, not necessarily what's interesting to our audience. And if we think like a media company, it just makes more interesting content.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good advice.
Cool, buddy. Well, hey, Tony, thank you so much. Congratulations on the book, and we'll have to do it again sometime. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
All right, cool. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.